Good morning, everybody. It is great to be with you today. I hope that you're all doing well. I want to begin by encouraging you, if you haven't already been joining us at our Wednesday night huddle, this Wednesday would be a really good time to start coming. You know, if it's been on your list, you've been planning to come, you just haven't been able to get around to it. We're going to begin a new study of Genesis beginning this Wednesday. So if you've been meaning to come and just haven't been able to, Wednesday would be a great time for you to come begin joining with us. For Wednesday Night Huddle, what we strive to do is dive just a little bit deeper into Scripture, to dive a little bit deeper and try and learn more from one another. So if you haven't been there and you want to be, we'd love to see you. Let's read our text today this morning, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. Let's read it together. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. I remember the day Manny was born quite distinctly. I remember the first time that I held him, this little bitty 3-pound, 5-ounce bundle that was just this small little thing. And I remember as I held him in my arms, a little concerned that he somehow might break, I remember being struck by these 3 very distinct feelings. The first one was this sense of pride, for this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, shares my DNA, this is my child. I remember a sense of protectiveness, of don't you touch my baby. And I remember as I looked into those eyes, as I looked and saw this little bundle completely dependent upon me for everything, I remember a third very distinct feeling. What in the world have I gotten myself into? 10 years later, we've added 2 more kids, and I still find those 3 feelings hold true most days. The third, every day I'm struck with a sense of pride that these are my kids. I'm proud of who they are. I'm struck with a sense of protectiveness of, don't you hurt my child. And I'm struck with a sense of what in the world have I gotten myself into? And I know I can't be the only one who experiences these feelings. I found that there are days when I'm really good at parenting, days when I do it well. There are days when my kids don't fight. There are days when they seem to listen well and do what I said and even comprehend everything that I've told them. And then there are days when I don't do parenting well. Those days when I seem to lose my temper just a touch too quick. Those days when everything seems to be spinning out of control. Those days when they seem to be at each other's throats. And those are the days when I find myself feeling inadequate, feeling ill-equipped to be a parent. And I suspect that everyone has experienced those particular points in times who's ever had kids. And if you have kids today, there's a good chance that you've experienced those feelings relatively recently too. This morning I want us to explore how we as parents, we as imperfect parents, might continue to maintain hope as we strive to parent our children. I want us to look at 5 specific ways. And the first thing that we are to remember, if we're to maintain hope as we try and parent our children as imperfect parents, is that we are not alone. If you got your Bibles, turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 19. But before you do that, I wonder, how many Bibles do we have? How many Bibles are there? What a fantastic sight. 1 Kings chapter 19. And I know that says verses 10 through 18, but we're going to start at verse 9. To set everything up, Elijah is fleeing from Jezebel. In chapter 18, he has defeated the prophets of Baal there on Mount Carmel in a magnificent way where God answers by fire. And in chapter 19, Jezebel has threatened Elijah's life and said that I'm going to find you and I'm going to kill you today. And Elijah has taken off to the wilderness and run into the wilderness. And there, an angel meets him and draws him towards the mountain where he will eventually meet God. In verse 9, there he, that is Elijah, came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He said, "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And he said, Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? He said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left. And they seek my life to take it away. And the Lord said to him, Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah, you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death. And the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Now here's my question. Notice again verse 18. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Why did God say that? Why did God tell Elijah that there were 7,000 who had not bowed a knee to Baal? Why not simply just tell Elijah, I'm God, I've been with you up to this point. I just answered you by fire on Mount Carmel. I've been with you this whole time. All you need to do is trust me and keep going. I need you to go anoint this king. I need you to anoint that king. I need you to anoint another prophet. Why include that there were 7,000 whose knees had not bowed to Baal? It was because in the midst of all of the turmoil, Elijah needed to know that he wasn't all by himself. That he wasn't as alone, nearly as alone as he thought he was. The truth is that in life, in the midst of the storms and the challenges of life, they have an isolating effect. That we can find ourselves feeling like nobody else has ever been through this particular challenge. Nobody's ever experienced this kind of pain. Nobody has ever experienced this kind of agony and uncertainty. And the same happens in parenting. That we can arrive at the conclusion that nobody else has ever faced the challenges that we faced. Nobody else's kids fight on their way to church. Nobody else's kids seem like their brains drain out of their ears and onto the pillow in the middle of the night. Nobody else's kids face any of these challenges. It's just mine. It's just our family. Now, cognitively, we know that not to be true. We know up here that we're not the only ones who face these challenges. We're not the only ones who face moments of uncertainty and seem like our kids are going to strangle one another. But yet, in the midst of it all, it's hard to believe it here. And we can find ourselves wrestling with what we know to be true, but what we feel to be true, that we feel like we're all by ourselves, that nobody else has ever faced these challenges before. Which means that in the midst of the difficulties of parenting, in the midst of those times when we feel inadequate and maybe a little hopeless, we have to cognitively remember and tell ourselves we're not the only ones. Which leads us to the second thing we must do. And that is to look for support from others. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Throughout life, we're faced with the choice of whether we will trust our own instincts and our own thoughts, or whether we will trust that which God has told us. And the same is true within parenting. For it turns out that part of what makes parenting so challenging and so difficult is that we as parents who haven't really finished growing are trying to help other human beings grow. We who are parents who are still learning what it means to be an adult are helping to prepare others to try and be adults when we're still trying to figure out what an adult means. We as parents who are trying to help our kids learn how to live in this world and how to survive are teaching our children how to live and survive while we too are still trying to figure out how to live and survive. It's part of what makes it difficult and challenging. I'm reminded of what God told his people as he was leading them into the promised land. He said that he was going to lead them himself. And he said that he was going to lead them because they had not been this way before. They didn't know which way to go. And since that they had never been this way before, he himself was going to lead them, for he knew the way. As parents, we have never been this way before. It doesn't matter if you've had one child or if you're on your 10th child. You have never been this way before with this child at this age and this day and time before. It's a new path. And we've never been this way before. And so the question that we are asked is whether we will choose to try and rely on our own understanding as individuals who are still trying to grow and still trying to figure all this out. Or whether we will choose to rely upon the principles and the commands and the examples that we see within Scripture of the one who has been this way before and the one who knows how to make it through. That if we are to continue to have hope as imperfect parents, we have to first seek counsel and guidance from God himself. But we're also to seek support and counsel and guidance from others as well. If you will, turn me to Titus chapter 2. And I want us to read verses 1 through 6. Titus chapter 2, verses 1 through 6. For we're not only to seek the counsel of God and seek his guidance, we're also to seek the counsel of other Christians. But as for you, teach what accords with sound doctrine. Older men are to be sober-minded, dignified, self-controlled, sound in faith, in love, and in steadfastness. Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God might not be reviled. Likewise, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. I want us to notice again verse 4, that older women are to teach younger women, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children. Why would we need to teach someone to love their family? Because it's something that doesn't come easy. Yeah, of course, there are days when it does come easy. There are days when we feel filled with love. And we're bursting at the seams, so happy to be part of this family. But then there are days when we feel like our family is our enemy. And we're to love them still in the midst even of that. And here Paul explicitly states that older women are to teach younger women how to love their families. And notice that it's not just older women who are to teach younger women, that older men are to teach younger men how to be self-controlled and not given to much anger. That as dads, we can't be losing our temper with our family all the time. We can't be this close to breaking and losing our self-control at every moment in time, for we are to raise our children in the knowledge and the admonition of the Lord while not moving them to anger. If we are to maintain hope as imperfect parents, it means looking to the example of others. And notice specifically those who are older. For sometimes as parents we have a tendency to look to our peers, those who have children that are in the same age bracket as ours. And certainly there's a place for that. If nothing else, we are reminded that we're not the only ones going through this. You guys are going through it too. And we compare notes to see, okay, what worked for you, what worked for me, and we try and help each other out, and we should. Yet if all we ever do is ask for the counsel of those who are in the same life stage as we are, then we miss out on the opportunity to learn from those who've already been through that life stage and the next future life stages and can say, let me tell you what's going to come next, and this is what you ought to look at doing now. And so if you're a younger parent and you find yourself wondering, what in the world am I supposed to do? What have I gotten myself into? I want to encourage you to find somebody who's a few seasons ahead of you and ask them, what did you do that worked? What did you do that didn't work? What advice would you give me as a parent in the midst of all this, just trying to do my best? And if you're an older parent, Perhaps one whose children have already left the nest and gone off someplace else. I want to encourage you to find those younger parents because you remember what it was like. You remember the difficulties and the long nights and the sleepless nights. You remember the times when you felt stuff in the pit of your stomach and you weren't really sure what to do. I want to encourage you to find those younger parents, to come up alongside them. For sometimes the most helpful thing that you can do is simply state, I remember what that was like. Keep going. You're doing a good job. And if there's anything I can do, I would love to sit down and be able to talk with you for a minute. If there's anything I can do to help you, just let me know. Because sometimes just knowing that there's somebody coming alongside can make a world of difference. If we are to maintain hope as imperfect parents, we are to also practice confession. It was winter when Aurora and I lived in Michigan. It was a Sunday. And this particular Sunday, we'd made our way to church, and the amount of snow that was falling had increased exponentially while we sat there for an hour. Aurora and I had driven different cars, and she left before I did. And I got a phone call that said I've slid off the road right near our driveway. At that point, we lived out in the middle of nowhere, about 40 minutes away, and our driveway was forever long. And she'd slid right right in front of the driveway. And I told her, all right, well, why don't you go ahead and take Manny, who couldn't have been more than one at the time. Why don't you take him into the house so you guys can stay warm, and I'll take care of it as soon as I get home. Drove up in my little Buick, pulled off to see what the damage had been done. And I found and discovered that my wife, when she does something, she does it really well. When she slid off into the road, she managed somehow to slide to where the middle of the car was on top of a hill, and no tires were making contact with the ground. How do you get a car unstuck when the tires aren't touching the ground? You call a tow truck. It's the first time I've ever seen a tow truck spin his wheels and bounce trying to get a car out. We did eventually get it out, by the way. If you've ever gotten your car stuck, whether it be the snow or the sand or the mud, you know that one of the first things you have to do is to stop spinning your wheels. Because if you just keep spinning, all you're going to do is keep sinking, and you get nowhere and you go nowhere. In other words, if you were to get unstuck, the first thing you have to do is admit that you're stuck and stop spinning your wheels. James chapter 5. Therefore, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another, that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is great, or has great power as it is working. Essentially, what James says here is the first step to recovery is admitting that you have a problem. He specifically focuses upon sin, and if we are to get ourselves unstuck from sin, we have to admit that we have a problem. But the same principle is true within other areas of our lives. That if we are to try and move forward, out of what we find ourselves stuck in, that we have to admit that something's going on. Someone has called it the crazy cycle. Picture the idea of a merry-go-round that's spinning so fast, you really just want to get off, but it seems to be spinning so fast, you're not really sure how. That's the crazy cycle, and you've all experienced it. You might have experienced it in your marriage. You might have experienced it at work. You probably experienced it with your children. It's those times when, try as you might, you seem to keep getting the same result. You say something, and all of a sudden somebody else says something else, and you respond in return, and before you know it, you're just spinning in this cycle that seems to never end. And you try something different, you seem to end up right back in the same place again. It's the crazy cycle. You've seen it with your kids. They say something and you say something in response, and before you know it, the whole day seems to be ruined and everybody's at each other's throats, and you're caught in the crazy cycle. If we are to be able to get out of the crazy cycle, we must first be willing to admit that we are in the crazy cycle, to confess where we find ourselves at. And there's something about telling someone else what is going on. For, of course, we're first to confess to ourselves and admit to ourselves we have a problem, but ideally we don't just keep it to ourselves. Why? Because we need the support of others, and we go to someone whom we can trust. And we express, I just feel like I'm caught in this crazy cycle. And I'm not really sure what to do. I feel like no matter what happens, we keep ending up in the same place, and I've tried this and I've tried that, and nothing seems to be working. And there's something about that process. something about going and sharing with someone else what is going on, that it gives an unburdening effect. And suddenly we feel hope once again. That maybe there is hope, because at least now somebody else besides me knows what's going on. And I have a little bit of support. Leads us to the fourth aspect, to recognize that you will fail. Romans chapter 3:23 says that for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Now, you might be asking yourself, preacher, I thought this was about how to maintain hope. So how do we maintain hope when we say, I'm going to fail? As parents, one of the greatest concerns we have is that we're going to fail our children. Any good parent finds themselves wondering, am I doing something that's messing up my kids? Am I doing something that's going to lead to them being in a counselor's office talking about their childhood trauma today? Yes, you are. And you might ask, how is that encouragement? Well, we spend so much time worrying, and then for parents of today, we have this wonderful thing called social media, which is great and wonderful. However, there are a plethora of opinions about how to raise kids, and everybody is confident that they are right. And so in the midst of already the uncertainty we as parents have, you toss in this, everyone's saying that, no, you're wrong and I'm right. And we find ourselves wondering, am I doing everything wrong? And you might ask, how can the recognition that you will fail, how it can be any kind of encouragement? It frees us from the taskmaster of perfectionism. Because we can find ourselves so afraid that we might fail that we refuse to do anything. Refuse to take any chance. Refuse to try anything new, because we're certain that if we do something even so slightly wrong, that we're going to mess our kids up forever. But it is also when we recognize that we will fail that we can then ask the question, how can I help my children overcome my failures? For if we recognize and admit that I will fail despite my best efforts, despite how hard I might try, that I will fail my children in some way, then we are prepared to look at how we might help them through that failure. And that is to point our children to God. Let's look at our text in Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7, verse 22. John the Baptist has sent his disciples to Jesus, asking the question, are you the one that we're supposed to be looking for? Are you the Messiah? And Jesus answers in this way. And he answered them, go and tell John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed and the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, the poor have good news preached to them, and blessed is the one who is not offended by me. Notice how Jesus responds. He points to the miracles that he has done. Blind receive their sight, lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and good news is preached. Throughout the New Testament, throughout the Gospels, we read of the miracles that Jesus has done, most of which involve some aspect of healing, or bringing sight, or helping someone walk, or helping someone recover from an illness. And those miracles confirm who Jesus is, and their purpose is to confirm that he is God. But it also confirms the reality that Jesus is the one who can provide healing and heal that which is broken. If we as imperfect parents who are doomed to fail our kids in some way, if we desire to maintain hope, we are to point our children towards God. For where we fail, he does not. Where we are imperfect, he is perfect. Where we, despite our best efforts, may cause pain, our God is the one who heals. If we are to help our children overcome our failures, we must point them towards our God, which means intentionally engaging them in God, in a relationship with God and his commands, but also setting them an example. The text we read earlier this morning of Deuteronomy chapter 6, it paints a picture of biblical instruction throughout the regular rhythm of life. as you walk along the way, when you lie down and when you get up, when you sit at the dinner table and when you go to play games, when you're outside throwing football in the yard. In the regular rhythm of life, we are to teach and show an example of what it means to have a relationship with God. And as we help our children connect to a relationship with God, we also help connect them to the one who is able to help them overcome our failures. Over the years, I've heard parenting referred to in several different ways. I've heard it referred to as a journey. For there's a destination that we hope to get to, and we're on a journey with our children, hoping to help them get to that destination. I've heard it referred to as an adventure, for you never know what's going to happen from one day to the next, and it always seems to be an adventure. And I've heard it referred to as practice for the big game, that we're trying to help prepare our children and instill in them what they need for when they become adults, the big game, if you will. But I wonder if we shouldn't add at least one more, that parenting is war. For every day we wake up and we battle for the lives and for the well-being of our children. We strive to protect them from anything that would do them harm. We're constantly looking out for landmines and things that might somehow damage them. We have to remember which battles are worth fighting and which are not. But there are times when we experience great victories and times when we experience defeats. That there are times when we are full of adrenaline and times when we find ourselves doing mundane tasks. Parenting is war. And if a war is to be won, it is essential that those who are in the midst of it maintain hope. Maintain hope that there will be a better day. Maintain hope that victory is possible. Maintain hope of what the goal is. If we as parents, imperfect parents, are to be able to survive and win the war with our children, we have to maintain hope. Maintain hope by recognizing our limitations. Maintain hope by confessing to one another where we find ourselves. Maintain hope by looking for help, and predominantly maintain hope by continuing to seek the one who can make up for our failures. Perhaps you're here today and you want to begin a relationship with the one who loves you most. And there's nothing that would excite us more than to help you begin that journey, which starts at baptism. Or perhaps you're here and you want to make a change. Or maybe you find yourself, as some parents do, whose children have already left the nest. And when you hear a sermon on parenting, you think of all the things you wish you'd done differently. And we'd love to be able to pray, because the greatest thing that we can do is continue to try and help your children connect with God, that they might have a relationship with him too. If there's any way we can assist you, won't you come as together we stand and sing.